Hey guys, happy Sunday. I'm John Clifford, the lead pastor with Greenhouse Project, and it is great to be with you today. Here at Greenhouse, we are missioned out of our home in Chester on East 23rd Street. And the reason we're here is to see radical transformation happening with individuals, families, and our community. We want to see our city transformed, and we literally believe that it's the Word of God, it's the communion, the gathering of the body of Christ that will love and reach out into a neighborhood for radical transformation. Our tagline is, we help people grow in difficult places. And whether that's a physical place or a difficult place, no matter what you're going through, we want to walk side by side with you for life wherever you're at. And we do that through loving our neighbors. We do that through rebuilding families. We do that through making long-term commitments to both people and communities. And in that, we live a gospel-centered life. So we hold events, we do drug and alcohol recovery coaching and counseling, and we have various outreach to youth and programs like mentorship. So if you want to learn any more about our ministry, please go to ghproject.org. And there on our website, you can check out our events page, what's coming up next. We are having prayer walk and evangelism training happening Saturday, May 8th, and that's going to be here at 10 a.m. We're going to disperse throughout our neighborhoods to knock on doors, to pray with people, to develop relationships, and to share Jesus Christ, and especially pray for those that are hurting and broken in our community. And that following Tuesday on the 8th, we are kicking up our discipleship in-house here on Tuesday nights. We love for you guys to be there and to walk a journey with us. So please go to our website. We don't hold back the fact that we are a donor-supported ministry, so it's because of gifts and tithes and donations we're able to serve and do what we do. So we're grateful for those that have made a commitment to partner with us. And if you are being moved today to give, as so many people have, you can do that right on our website under Donate. But let's pray and get into why we're here today, which is the Word of God. We are in Matthew 16, verses 21 through 28 this week. Let's get into the Word. I'm going to read it and then pray, and we'll get into our message today. Matthew 16, starting in verse 21, says this. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and be raised on the third day. But Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord, this shall not happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan, for you are an offense to me. You are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. And Jesus said to his disciples, If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? And what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he will reward each according to his works. Surely I say to you that there are some standing here who shall not taste death until they see the King of Man, the Son of Man, coming in his kingdom. Let's pray. Father God, we praise you, we worship you, Lord. God, we're in all of the work that you've been doing in lives and communities and cities and countries, God, but always in the work of transforming the heart of man. God, thank you that you love broken people, that you desire to see them restored, that you understand that each person is fallen and they need your help to be saved. Please, God, let salvation visit us, visit our neighbors and our community. So we thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen. You know, I was thinking this week about my teenage years, and I grew up in Pennsylvania, Delaware County, raised in Morton, born in Chester, raised in Morton. And in my summer years as a teenager, and yes, haha, funny joke, I was young at one point. But my summertime, our family didn't really travel. We didn't have a big family vacation every year. But what we did is we went to, there was a local pool that we went to throughout the summer. So I used to hang out at the pool, and man, I had a blast with friends and swimming and swim team and all sorts of cool events. But I remember I started to hang out with this girl that I really liked, and we were talking, we were hanging out, and we even went to a few dances that they had at the pool. And you know, I might have been a young teenager at this point, but it was a really good time of life for me. And they always say to be young and to be in love, oh, what a great time it was. But I had this expectation that she liked me and I really liked her. We spent a lot of time together and we were good. Well, one day I decided to find out that if she wanted to be my girlfriend. And when I asked her and told her that what my dreams and visions and my expectations were, she said she liked me, but she really liked my friend more. I remember being crushed and heartbroken to say, man, there were some real expectations here. We're holding hands, we're hanging out, you know. But it was like a punch in the gut to find out that this girl didn't like me when all the signs said that she did. She actually wanted to be with my friend. We can all identify with hard news of what it's like to have an expectation of something coming and to be punched in the gut. And I know so many stories of individuals that maybe they had this idea that they were going to get into a certain college, and maybe there was people that said that they would, and they had all the check marks off and they were denied. You know, maybe it's just that idea of looking to get this job and you really thought you had your way into a job or into a position just to find out at the last minute you didn't get it. And we could put a lot of stories in there. I was talking with Pastor Donnie this week, and he said he remembers when he was playing at his grandparents' house and he was going through a bunch of photos and saw his mom in a wedding dress with another guy that wasn't his dad. And he got a wake-up call that day when he found out that his mom was married to someone else before his dad. We can all identify with what hard news and being hurt feels like. And in Matthew 16, we are coming out of a spot where Jesus and his disciples, Jesus just asked his disciples, who do you say I am? He takes them to Caesarea Philippi, where I've been before, this area that was known for fresh springs and lush vegetation, and it was an oasis in the desert. And Jesus takes people into Gentile territory, and he takes them to a spot that's literally one of the major sites for pagan worship. No good Jew would go there. And Jesus takes his men to this watering hole, to this oasis, and they look at everybody coming to worship false gods. Everybody knows why they were there. And Jesus asks his disciples, guys, who do you say that I am? And in that moment, Peter is moved to confess Jesus as his Lord and Savior. In this moment, when Peter actually confesses that he believes that Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, the chosen one of God, the only Son of God, it was in this moment that everything starts to change, and heaven has moved Peter. Jesus said, only my Father has revealed this to you from heaven. Now that they've graduated and they're ready to know Jesus for who he is, Jesus is going to reveal his full plan for them. And they think they have an expectation of what's going to happen. But the truth is, they really don't, and they're in for a major wake-up call. In this message, we are going to see Jesus reveal who he is. We're going to see Jesus rebuke a disciple, and we're going to see Jesus refocus their mission and purpose for following him. He reveals what's going to happen inside of all this. And I was reading a commentary, and James Boyce really highlighted this interesting concept of proper etiquette. And it's this idea when you introduce two parties, you should introduce one person's name, give somebody the person's name, but also give them one piece of information. And in the book he writes, hey, this is Paul and he's a doctor. All right, and then, hey, this is, John and he's a chef. And Peter just announced that Jesus is the Son of God, right? God in the flesh, the Messiah. So he's actually introduced to who Jesus is. Now, Jesus is going to introduce to Peter what he actually does. And it's a fair question. What does Jesus do? What would someone say about you in an introduction? Usually it's a trade or your skill or a great achievement. There's an older man that lives just a few houses down from us right now. His name's Terrell, and he was the Olympic gold medalist in the 1984 Olympics for boxing. He even beat Mike Tyson. And I was visiting with I had someone over to visit and to meet this. I said, man, you got to meet Tyrell. He's an Olympic winning gold medalist, and he beat up Mike Tyson. I mean, how cool is that? You know, somebody might say, oh, I'm a doctor or lawyer or so-and-so, or hey, maybe you ate 14 hot dogs once. I don't know. There's weird things that people are known for. Quick note, I don't like hot dogs. I actually don't eat them. Just in case you wanted to make me some food, hot dogs are definitely off the table. But the point is, from now, there's a formal introduction to the person of Jesus, who he actually is, and now we get to see Jesus revealed for what he actually came to do. And here's a quick note I want everybody to understand looking into this text. We have the privilege of being born again now for those that believe and follow. We have the privilege of having lots of information, meaning not only the text, but a lot of commentaries and thousands of years of people looking into this information. So there's a lot of information we have access to. And for those that are filled with the Holy Ghost, we have spiritual manna from heaven as well. But I want to highlight for you today to look through this through the disciples' position, where they're not filled with the Holy Ghost yet. They have the Holy Spirit move on them in some instances, but I want to look at what they understand and what they would have felt in that moment over 2,000 years ago. They didn't have the end of the story. They were literally with Jesus in Caesarea Philippi. You guys ready? Verse 21, it says, from that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and be killed and raised up on the third day. What the heck? These are the same words that Matthew used in 4:17 to mark the transition following Jesus' temptation with Satan. As soon as Jesus gets filled with the Holy Spirit, he's driven out in the wilderness for 40 days to be tempted by Satan. And now he begins to show his disciples that he must suffer and die. And if we back up, Peter just identified Jesus as the Messiah, and Jesus blessed him for his confession of faith. However, Jesus told the disciples not to tell anyone because they don't really understand what Messiahship means yet. They don't fully understand. To them, the Messiah was this warrior king, kind of like King David when we read with him through 1st and 2nd Samuel and through Psalms. In verse 21, Jesus outlines what to expect from the real Messiah. And it's the exact opposite of what their expectation was. Just like asking a girl out and this girl saying, I never really liked you anyway, I liked someone else. That punch in the gut feeling that we talked about. They wanted the Messiah to be a political giant to drive out the Roman Empire and once again establish Israel as a free and independent nation led by God. And if that happened, that would put the disciples in position to be rich and famous heroes and also leaders of the nation along with Christ. I'm getting excited now, right? That's the way that they're looking at this. In other words, they and their family would be set for life if this happened. Maybe one day someone will write a story or a tale about what these men went through re-establishing Israel and getting rid of the occupying forces. I think if it was today, the disciples would say, man, I wonder how many followers I get on Instagram, or how many people would watch my TikToks. Maybe they would say, how many millions of copies would I sell on my books, or what's my reality show going to be? What type of fame and fortune can I establish for my family going forward? We have to understand that these are regular guys, regular people like us that breathe and eat and hurt and have personal ambition and are confused by looking at the things around us because they're looking from a natural human perspective for everything. These guys really didn't understand what Jesus was saying. He's saying, and the word says from this time forth, meaning from here until we get to the end of, till Jesus is actually arrested and crucified. He's telling them over and over again, he's unfolding more what he came to do. And it all has to be surrounded about his death, being crucified by the leaders. And when we fast forward, because we do know the end, we understand that they forgot a lot of these things until Jesus was raised from the dead. Jesus said that he must go to Jerusalem. He must. It identifies that it's necessary for him to do this. It speaks of a divine necessity, God's will directed upon Jesus. He knew that this was the thing that he was marching towards, a sure death. Jesus found fulfillment in God's word alone, and he had a mission and a purpose, and nothing would drive him off track from that. Jesus must go to Jerusalem to complete God's mission. He has come to save the world by taking the penalty of sin upon himself, and in Jerusalem the essential work will take place. Jesus must suffer many things, and Isaiah 53, 4 through 6 introduces the idea of a suffering servant. So the idea would be completely foreign to his disciples, that there was no beauty to attract him, that he was marred for our iniquities, that he took the pain and the penalty for sin upon himself, that he didn't speak, he was silent when this all happened. They marched him to the grave, to the cross for a death. And they discovered in this moment, as Jesus is revealing that this idea of a perfect political candidate would suddenly announce that his purpose was to be assassinated first and then run for office. Imagine that. Whoever your political person is, look at the past elections, and they said, I want to be this for you, your president, your senator, your congressman, your mayor, but I need to die first. Who in their right mind would say such horrible things? And to make matters even more challenging, Jesus says he'll suffer by the hands of the elders, chief priests, and scribes. These three groups that made up the Sanhedrin, which was pretty much like the Supreme Court for the Jews. Jesus announced that it's not the worst men who will kill him, but the best men. The men that have no legal authority to oppose a death sentence because they're under the rule of Rome. But they will ultimately decide that Jesus must die. And Jesus says, no one takes my life. I lay it down willingly. They will then persuade the people to support the sentence and have the Romans carried out. When we think about the words elders, chief priests, and scribes, for those that have been hearing about them since childhood, or maybe you're new to it, many times we talk about them as Jesus' enemies, or enemies of the kingdom of God. And these people were actually trying to uphold and to protect Israel's religious heritage and to make sure that the lineage of God will continue. And just imagine their mind being blown of this guy that they've been following, who's been doing miraculous things, that they're actually in the position to be at the center of the movement of Israel being restored. And they say, Jesus, you're going to be what? Wait a second. You're going to be killed? How can a dead man save anyone? How can a Messiah save people if he can't save himself? Why would God send anyone to do something so ungodly as dying? Hey, Jesus, I don't know if anybody told you, but this doesn't sound like a good plan to me. Jesus reveals what he actually does in this text, what his true purpose is for coming. By his stripes, we are healed. And I've done a lot of counseling, and we do a lot of counseling down here at Greenhouse. And a lot of people call, stop by, or schedule meetings to ask for advice. Someone called me on Friday and said, "Hey, Pastor John, I just have a question to ask you. I'm in a rehab up here in Roxborough, just outside of Philadelphia, and I'm wondering, maybe I should move, relocate, or leave and go to another area." And I'm like, "Well, where are you thinking about going?" He's like, "Well, I'd like to go to Florida and get away from all the people here. I'd like to move." So when I'm presented with this, because this isn't the first time, I usually ask a bunch of questions. How long have you been in rehab? Oh, okay. How many times have you been there? Oh, you've been back to this rehab 5 times. You've been in multiple rehabs. Oh, okay. How many years you've been in addiction? 5, 10, 15, 20 years. How bad is your addiction? Oh, it caused you to go to rehab, lose all your money, your friends, your family, your job. You got arrested. You went to prison. And are those all the consequences you faced? No, I lost custody of my daughter and all these other things. And there's just, by asking a few questions, there's just this list that unfolds of horrible things. Then God has always led me to ask this next question. So, who's been making all your decisions during this time? And they stumble around. They're like, "Well, I have." And I'm like, "So, who's the problem?" And they're like, "Well, I guess it's me." And then I say, "Well, if you relocate, won't you just take you with you?" See, moving from a location to another part of the state may get you out of being around people, places, and things for a minute, but it takes the focus away of what the real problem is. The problem isn't the outside forces. Most likely it's the problem that's going on inside me, my wicked heart. Peter sees Jesus' plan as crazy, and he steps into a spot where he thinks he can save Jesus and give him some well-needed advice. After all, Peter is a rock star, right? He's from Philly, right? His nickname's Rocky, right? Get it? He's from Philly. And Rocky wins all of his fights. And since Peter is the rock star of his group, he's the first one to confess Jesus, and Jesus just called him blessed, right? And he just gave him the keys to the kingdom of God and said, "Man, my Father has been revealing things to you. Peter should be the one to set Jesus straight." And he never once saw what would be coming next as Jesus rebukes him. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "Far be it from you, Lord, this will never happen to you." At least Peter has the decency to probably put his arm over Jesus and walk him aside and pull him aside so it's private, it's away from a bunch of people. And he probably thought Jesus was probably just having a bad day, like maybe he didn't eat and he's kind of like hangry, like those guys that are in a commercial. "Hey, give him a Snickers, he'll feel better." "Hey, Jesus, we need to talk." Peter feels a responsibility for preventing him from doing anything that would damage his career. Peter's rebuke, although it's friendly, Peter is still focused on himself through this entire time. He's saying, "Jesus, if we just remove this thing, you're going to be fine." And in this, in the words that he uses, he actually challenges Jesus' lordship and goes from a position of following Jesus into a position of starting to lead Jesus. And he literally crosses the line. No rabbi or no disciple or no boss, for instance, would allow that to happen. Disciples were expected to follow the rabbi. And we should not be surprised that Peter fails to understand, since he is operating in his human power. His weakness for protecting his own personal safety and preserving his position is dictating how he's reacting to the situation. But look at what Jesus does, verse 23. "But he turned and said, 'Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of men.'" Jesus turns to confront Peter face to face, and it sounds as if Peter has been physically positioned in a spot where Jesus is like, no, get behind me. Jesus demands that Peter moves behind him spiritually as well as physically. Now, I want everybody to circle that word offense or stumbling block or whatever might be in that spot. The Greek word is scandalon, where we get the word scandal from. And it means a snap, a trap, or a snare, maybe a baited stick, some type of movable trigger, right? And it's something placed in the way to cause someone to stumble or fall. It's literally a rock in the road that would cause you to move out of the direction that you're going. A rock. Peter is in his way right now. Peter is an offense because he's setting up Jesus or asking Jesus to go in a different direction other than to be killed and to take the penalty of sin upon himself. Jesus' words are so similar to "Get behind me, Satan" in Matthew when he's being tempted in the wilderness. The difference here is Jesus commanded Satan to move away, to flee, and here he just asked Peter to move to his proper position, which is behind him as the disciple, as the follower. Jesus took Jesus aside to rebuke him. Jesus says, no, Peter, you don't understand. I have a different path to go on. Even worse could happen when Peter decides to become an enemy or used by Satan, and Satan is any force which seeks to deflect us from the way of God. All right? Satan is a force which seeks to deflect us from the way of God. He's a real person, but it can also be tempted to move people away from the way of God. And this is what Peter is doing. He's trying to deflect Jesus from his God-given path to the cross. Peter's temptation is very serious. Just as Satan tried to persuade Jesus to take the easy way in the temptation, he said, hey, make a spectacle of yourself and turn these stones into bread. He's saying, take the easy way out, Jesus. Bow down and worship me. So now, Peter calls Jesus to abandon the narrow, rough, difficult road that leads to the cross for a wide, smooth road that leads to destruction. But why would Peter be doing this? Verse 23 says, for you are setting your mind on the things of God. For you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of this world. And this isn't the way Peter sees it. Peter understands that Jesus is the Messiah and simply trying to keep him from spoiling everything in a weak moment. Peter wants the Messiah to succeed. And how can it be that bad? The answer is that Peter's vision of the mission is skewed. Many times each one of us are faced with challenges. This week I was in a meeting where a bunch of pastors were talking about how they would react if their kids stood up in public school to read Genesis. And there's a line in Genesis in the beginning that said, God made them male and female alike. In today's day and age, to stand up in a school class to say we believe God made people male and female can cause a lot of trouble and backlash in this world. They said, imagine how much pressure there is to abandon God's word and not say male and female. And what I've learned is that the church and people of God are always tempted to take the easy way out instead of God's low road. Guys, the truth shall set us free. God made people in his image. Man and woman, he made them alike. It's the truth, and we stand on that no matter what. We bank on preaching God's word day in and day out, the truth of everything. We are tempted to put our faith in the world's methods so easily through advertising and fundraising and psychology and social media and theatrics and production values, instead of God's method, which is the cross, preaching the cross, taking up your cross, and serving the needy in Christ's name. We are tempted to evaluate ministries by standards by which accountants or CEOs would be comfortable. Churches are really great. We're great at counting membership and attendance and budgets and setting goals of objectives, instead of standards of the one who had nowhere to lay his head and whose throne was on the cross. There are certain ministries that are both faithful and successful that do these things. But we have to be very, very careful, because sometimes a ministry that sells is not always a ministry that saves. A life that is given to profit may not be a life given to saving the lost. The priorities become skewed. And it's a real question to ask you here and now. Have you taken the easy road for your life? Have you looked at your current situation and said, here's the easy 5 things to do? Cheat on my taxes, not get married and sleep with this girl, and lie to my customers or my bosses? Or should I lay down and be honest in spite of consequence? Shall I be a truth bearer in spite of consequence? Will I share the godly thing written in His Word in spite of what this world is going to offer me? Because, friends, that's what it's like to follow Jesus. In 1 Corinthians, he says, brothers, consider the time of your calling. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were powerful, nor were many of you from noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. Peter is right one minute but wrong the next. And since the air is clear, Jesus takes the positioning to refocus and to lay down the truth of what it means to be with Jesus and a disciple of Jesus. And here's the reality. There are many people that say that they follow Jesus, but only few are actual disciples. It says in verse 24, he says, and Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what profit is it for a man to gain the whole world and to lose his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? One thing for sure, the cross is on the horizon. It's getting closer and closer every single day. Jesus, in his role as their rabbi, instructs his disciples on the meaning of what it means to be a disciple, not just a follower, but one that walks side by side with Christ. Jesus calls the disciple to a disciplined life. And he says, if anyone desires to come after me. These disciples earlier left everything they had to follow Jesus. Family, friends, businesses. And now Jesus is inviting them to reassess and to make a decision based off new information on what it means to follow Jesus. And though they thought that they were following Jesus on the road to glory, but now it tells them they might be on the road to self-denial and even death. Because Jesus says, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. The self-denial of which Jesus speaks is not easy to grasp. One thing to deny ourselves today, it doesn't mean let me not eat today so I can eat tomorrow. It doesn't mean let me put my money away today so I can have much money later. He's not teaching people the value of compound interest like some people want to teach what self-denial is. You want to know why? Because even the world does that. Unbelievers live that way. Self-denial is not the method for delayed gratification. What Jesus talks about self-denial is denying oneself, sacrifice one's own interest in favor of serving Christ. It means choosing the things of God over the things of this world. And ultimately, that's where real fulfillment comes from. One must be willing to reevaluate everything, put everything out on the table, the metaphorical chalkboard, write everything that you have or love up on there, and you must be willing to turn and walk away from every last one of things. And I'm going to say something. This isn't out of fear. It's not out of blind fear. It's much more than that. It's finding something so valuable that it's being fulfilled by love. And I don't know if you remember this, but I remember this joke back in the day. Whenever a guy would get a girlfriend, he would hang out with it too much. People say, "Oh, you're whipped, man. You're whipped. You do everything that girl tells you to do, and you spend all your time with them. You're so whipped, right?" To be honest, yeah. Once you fall in love, head over heels in love, you desire to spend all your time wanting to be with that person, to talk to them on the phone, to see them. You're willing to reorganize your schedule and stop playing the drums or the trumpet or tinkering with your car. Whatever those things are, go out the window. All of this is out of true devotion and worship and gratitude of what our Savior has done for us. In light of my sin being purchased upon him, I'm willing to turn everything away. And there's this metaphor of someone finding a field with a great treasure in it and selling all of his belongings and anything he ever had, including his birthright, to purchase this field because the treasure in there was so much more greater. My friend Ryan, who was a junkie and a criminal and a guy from Delco, came out of City Team multiple times, and I love this young man until today, and we still talk regularly. Ryan would do well, and he had the fire of God upon him and would preach and then would relapse. And the last time he relapsed, it was pretty hard, so I suggested and got together with his family to suggest that we get him up to Maine through a recovery program with Pastor Ken Graves. And he did. He went through this intense recovery program, and afterwards he decided he didn't want to live for him. He was willing to wait to hear what God had for him. And there was presented an opportunity for him to move to Africa, Uganda. And this is this kid from Tinicum, Leicester, we're close to where the Philadelphia airport is, to move to a country, halfway around the world where he doesn't know the language, he doesn't look the same as other people. But he got alone and prayed and said, "God, I'm going to take a step of faith and put everything in on you and deny my comfortability, deny what it's like to be an American citizen with having everything I need in front of me and go to serve you." And once he was there, he was given to the ministry of preaching and teaching and serving and discipling men. And eventually he met a woman and got married, and they had a kid, and they're currently pregnant now, talking about how they can invest the rest of their life into serving Jesus Christ and him crucified. Someone once said, "He is no fool who gives what he can't keep to gain what he cannot lose." I didn't care about being a chef anymore when I got saved. The only thing I knew is I didn't want to be a junkie and a criminal, and I wanted to tell everybody about the man who made it happen. So at 30, when I went to live at a rescue mission for the homeless, I didn't go to get a big fancy job. I worked part-time, started to go to school, and got an internship making $250 a month. Yeah, how about that? The self-seeking life is all about fulfillment of my desires and my needs. And Jesus is saying, for those who are actually walking with me, side by side, you must be about my Father's business just like I am. Being a disciple is not talk, but action like Jesus. Christian means little Christ, meaning we must be willing to go to the cross and die with him. The cross was no fun thing to talk about. It's an instrument of torture and an instrument of death. But today we look at the cross as joy, and Jesus looked at it at joy and didn't look at the shame, but he looked at the joy. And we must see it as the disciples see it in this text. They look at the cross as bringing a lot of sorrow to their world. the cross was one of the most horrible ways to die, and the Romans lined the walkways and the highways and the byways going into cities with crosses and crucified people to let them know what happens if you get out of line. We must identify that when Jesus died, we died, and our sinful nature went to the cross with him. And guess what? Most of these disciples would be killed by the cross or through extreme torture. And they went on preaching and teaching and living the way Jesus did. Tradition says Peter and his wife were both crucified within, a short time of each other. And they were killed by the cross. Never again would Peter deny Jesus as he did in the garden. Yet at the end, he took the same death he did, even being crucified upside down, because he didn't feel that his death could be anything compared to Jesus' death. He didn't find it was unworthy for him to die even the death that Jesus did. I often wonder who I would be if somebody came to nail me on a cross today. My question is there enough evidence for someone to do that? Is there enough evidence for someone to do that in your world? Have you made the conscious decision, or maybe this is the first time you're hearing this text and you literally need to get alone and to reevaluate who you are and what you're doing walking with Christ. Jesus says, whoever desires to save his life will lose it, and whoever will lose his life for my sake will find it. We find our life in him, and that can only happen through willing to let my old nature go and let it be dead. And the repentance moves me on a new path. I confess my sin, and I believe Jesus is faithful and just, and that sends me on a new path, a complete 180. The meaning of discipleship is slowly unfolding. Jesus will unpack this until he gets arrested in the garden and then preaches to them afterwards. But the disciples didn't fully understand what they actually signed up for. And Jesus clearly states what lies ahead. He already told them that I must go to Jerusalem. It's a decree from the Father. It has to happen. I'm going to suffer many things. And the chief elders and scribes and the chief priests are going to be the one that kills me. But I will be raised up on the third day. The first disciples were incredibly slow to understand. But we don't have to be surprised that spiritual growth is a slow and steady path that we know comes with pain. Our spiritual journey takes a lifetime to be conformed in the image. Although in a minute we're made holy because of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, but it takes a lifetime to be conformed as well. For those that have eyes to see, there is plain evidence right here in this text that Jesus wants lives to be saved. And he knows the only way he can do it is if we make the conscious decision to put them away and to find a new life in him. He's talking about being born new from the inside out, from above. When we look into this world, we see celebrities move from one spouse to the next. We see business leaders making more money and not going back. We see people live a rewards-based life here and now. Our life, for the disciple, it doesn't end with death. It actually starts there. When a person is willing to lose their life for Christ's service, they're freed from the fear of death. The person whom Christ is more important than possession is freed from slavery to materialism and can focus on what it means to follow the person of Jesus. The person who resists temptation finds him or herself stronger for the next temptation that comes around. And we can look at so many more points. Jesus ultimately says, "For what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world or forfeits his soul?" Jesus reminds his disciples to follow him and to deny the world's pleasures. In that, Jesus commits to give everything we need here and now, because he is coming back. He may die, he will get raised again, and he promises in this whole text, these few verses that we looked at today, that he is coming back, and he is ultimately coming back for a judgment based off the decision and work of people here on earth. Matthew 7, 21, 22, and 23 said, "Many will come to me in that day and say, Lord, Lord, have I not," put whatever you want in there, "have I not preached for your name's sake? Have I not helped old ladies across the street? Have I not done good things for you?" And eventually, Jesus says, "Flee from me, you workers from iniquity. Not everyone that says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and have done many wonders in your name? And I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness." Jesus is coming back for judgment to reward people according to their deeds. It's a payment. It's a singular payment. It's not we're rewarded for multiple deeds. It's looking as one individual, as a collective amount of deeds that they've done. It's almost like the payment for the end of the life. One group of people will get rewarded with eternity with Jesus, and another won't. This text is clear. There's a difference between a follower and one that is a disciple. A follower just listens and sits on the sidelines. The disciple is the one that's hearing what Jesus is doing and choosing to walk side by side with him into the life, death, and resurrection that Jesus preached here on earth. They're willing to deny the priorities and the needs of this world to follow Jesus into the kingdom. And I know the things I'm preaching are really hard today for us to grasp. They are really hard, but I urge you, wherever you're at, whatever you're listening to right now, don't look at this through physical, natural eyes. Don't look at this through your feelings. You have to get alone with God and ask the Holy Spirit to reveal to you what this is calling you to do. The Western church, yes, the American church, that I'm an American and I'm in this church, a lot of times we teach prosperity, we teach pain-free discipleship, pain-free following Jesus, and that's not true. There is a cost, my friend, to following Jesus. He said you must hate your mother, brother, and I'm going to say, my paraphrase, sister, aunt, and uncle. He's saying you must deny everything you love and turn away from that and follow me. And in that we're able to fulfill the kingdom of heaven here on earth as Jesus preached. He said, if you love me, you'll obey me. And this is great news for those that have abandoned everything and love Christ fully. We will be rewarded with eternal life with him, and we're walking with him. And here on earth, we get to see the world impacted just like Jesus was here. This is both a warning and a promise. For those trying to save their life here and live for themselves and to find comfortability, it's a warning. But those who are willing to lose their life for Jesus' sake, it's a promise. There is no part-time disciple. We must learn and live Jesus' plan for life. We can make a choice today off of actually understanding what this means and what you actually choose to follow. Are you a follower or are you a disciple? If you need to talk, we'd love to talk with this about you. You can email us at info@ghproject.org or go to our website at ghproject.org and email us, call us, and any more questions. We'd love to be able to walk this out with you. We want to see people's lives radically transformed. The first step is come alongside of us as we go out into the streets and do what Jesus do. We go and share the gospel. We pray for people. We're looking to meet needs as God has given us an opportunity to help the next person. Let's get into the text, into the scriptures, and get back to what Jesus called us to do. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for being with us. Father God, we thank you for the work that you're doing, always, God, in the hearts of broken people, Lord. And I always love that the church can be like an AA meeting where people that are walking in joy or people that are walking in challenging times can meet together and we can both support one another, God. We can laugh with those that are laughing. We can cry with those that are crying. God, may your message not fall on deaf ears of what it means to deny myself, to pick up my cross, and to follow you, God. Allow us to be able to share that truth with other people, God. We're excited that, and we're praying for revival to come into our communities and our towns. Lord, please do a miraculous work. Thank you always. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Guys, thank you so much for being with us. Have a great week.